sat on the old couch in the living room, tapping his fingers on the wooden armrest. His wife, Ada, stood in the corner, holding a plate of food. She looked tired, her eyes dull from years of stress. The television buzzed in the background, but no one paid attention to it. The tension in the house was heavy, like the air before a storm. "Why is this food cold?" Julius' deep voice cut through the silence. "I just served it," Ada said softly, fingers tightening around the plate. Julius snatched it from her hands and slammed it on the table. "Nonsense! Every day you give me problems in this house. What is it?" Their two children, David and Kemi, peeped from behind the kitchen door. They had learned to stay out of their father's way. Ada said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. She walked back into the kitchen and wiped her face with her wrapper. This was her life, a never-ending circle of insults, shouting, and frustration. Julius wasn't always like this when they first got married. He was a kind man. They didn't have much, but they had each other. He worked as a supervisor in a small company in Lagos. They lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment, but over the years, things changed. He lost his job, and instead of finding another one, he became bitter. He blamed Ada for everything. David, their eldest child, clenched his fist. "Mommy, why do you always let Daddy talk to you like this?" he asked in a whisper. Ada forced a smile. "He's still your father. Go and do your homework." David didn't argue. He knew his mother would never fight back. But deep inside, he promised himself that one day he would not be like his father. That night, Julius left the house to drink with his friends. Ada locked the doors and sat on the floor, thinking about her life. She didn't know how much longer she could take this. The next morning, Julius was nowhere to be found. He had returned late in the night, smelling of alcohol, and was now sleeping like a king. Ada prepared breakfast for the children and got them ready for school. Kemi, the younger of the two, hesitated at the door. "Mommy, won't Daddy give us transport money?" Ada sighed. She had learned not to rely on him. She reached into her purse and gave them the last 500 naira she had. "Manage this, okay?" David nodded. He was already used to it. "Bye, Mommy." As soon as they left, Ada went up to their room. "Julius, wake up." Julius groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. "What is it?" "You need to find a job. The children need school fees. There is no food in the house. We can't continue like this," Ada said. Julius sat up slowly, rubbing his face. "You think I don't know about this? Then do something about it." He glared at her. "Do you think it's easy to find a job in this country? If you're tired, pack your things and leave." Ada swallowed the lump in her throat. This was their life. Julius complaining, blaming, and doing nothing to change things. She left him in the room and went to wash clothes outside. She didn't notice their neighbor, Mama Nkechi, watching from the next compound. "Ada, how long will you continue like this?" Ada smiled weakly. "He's still my husband." Mama Nkechi shook her head. You better wake up before it is too late." Ada pretended not to hear, but deep down, she knew her neighbor was right. David had always been quiet, but inside he was tired of the way his father treated his mom. He was only 14, but he felt like the man of the house. One evening, after school, he walked into the house and saw his mother crying in the kitchen. "Mommy, what happened?" Ada quickly wiped her eyes. "Nothing, my son. I'm just tired." David knew better. He turned and walked to the living room where Julius was sitting, drinking beer. "Why do you always make mommy cry?" he said to his father. Julius raised an eyebrow. "Who do you think you're talking to?" David's hands balled into a fist. "A real father takes care of his family. You don't even try," David said. Julius stood up, towering over his son. "Say that again." David didn't back down. "I said, you don't act like a father." For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, Julius slapped David so hard that he fell to the ground. Ada rushed in. "Julius, why would you hit your son?" Julius pointed at David. "Teach that boy respect before I kill him." David stood up, his cheek burning, but his anger was stronger than the pain. He looked his father in the eyes and said, "One day I'll leave this house and I'll never come back." Julius laughed. "Good, go then." But that night, as Julius drank alone, a small voice inside him whispered, "What if the boy is right?" Outside, watching her children play, her heart was heavy. She had spent years in a marriage that drained her, waiting for a man who refused to change. She knew she had two choices: to stay and suffer, or leave and find a better life for her children. As she thought about it, her phone rang. It was her elder sister, Ifeoma. "Ada, how long will you continue like this?" Ifeoma's voice was firm. "Bring the children and come to my house. You don't have to live like this." Ada hesitated. Leaving Julius would mean facing shame. People would gossip. But what about her children? What kind of life would they have if she stayed? That night, as Julius snored beside her, Ada stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life without Julius. The next morning, Ada packed a small bag. She didn't take much, just some clothes and the little money she had saved. David noticed. "Mommy, what are you doing?" Ada looked at her son. "We are leaving." His eyes widened in excitement. "For real?" She nodded. "I can't let you and Kemi grow up in this house." David felt a rush of relief. He had dreamed of the moment, but never thought it would happen. They waited until Julius left for his usual drinking. Then, with their bags in their hands, they stepped out of the house. David held his mother's hands. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To my sister's house," Ada whispered. As they walked away, Kemi asked, "Will Daddy come and find us?" Ada didn't answer. She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing: she would never go back there again. Ada, David, and Kemi arrived at Ifeoma's house just as the sun was setting. The air smelled different, fresher, calmer, and free of tension. Ifeoma, a strong and independent woman, opened the door with a warm smile. "Ada, you finally did it," she said, pulling her into a tight hug. Tears welled up in Ada's eyes. For the first time in years, she felt safe. David and Kemi looked around the house, their eyes wide. It was smaller than their home, but it felt peaceful. "You don't have to worry anymore," Ifeoma assured her. "We'll figure things out together." That night, as Ada lay on her mattress in the corner of the room, she felt a strange sense of peace. There was no yelling, no fear, no insults. For the first time in years, she slept deeply. Meanwhile, back at their old home, Julius stumbled in, drunk as usual. "Ada," he called out. There was silence. He checked the room, empty. A sudden realization hit him. she was gone. At first, he laughed. "She'll be back," he muttered to himself. But as the hours passed and the house remained silent, a feeling of unease settled in his chest. Days passed and Ada didn't return. Julius became more irritated, snapping at everyone. He stopped going to the bar, stopped sitting outside with his friends. He never imagined Ada would leave. One evening, Mama Nkechi, their noisy neighbor, knocked on his door. "Oga Julius, where is your family?" she asked, folding her arms. Julius coughed. "They are fine." Mama Nkechi smirked. "So why are you looking so miserable?" Julius slammed the door in her face. He hated how people were talking. He searched for Ada's number on his phone, but she had blocked him. Even David's phone was off. For the first time in years, he felt lonely. He cooked for himself, but the food tasted bland. He washed his clothes, but they didn't smell fresh. The house that once felt like his kingdom now felt like a prison. Late at night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about all the times he shouted at Ada, insulted her, and ignored the children. Had he really lost them forever? He thought out loud to himself. Life at an Ifeoma's house was not easy, but it was peaceful. Ada got a job at a small restaurant, helping to serve customers. It didn't pay much, but it was enough for now. David and Kemi started school again. They missed their father, but they didn't miss the life they had left behind. One evening, as Ada sat on the small veranda, Ifeoma joined her. "You seem happier," Ifeoma noted. Ada nodded. "I am." "You deserve this, Ada." Ada smiled, but deep inside, she still felt a small sadness. She had spent years loving a man who never valued her. She had wasted so much time. But then she looked at David and Kemi laughing together, and she knew she had made the right choice. Julius sat outside his house, drinking alone. His friends had stopped coming around. He had lost his job months ago, lost his family, and now he was losing himself. One afternoon, he saw David walking past the street. "David," he called. David stopped. He turned, staring at his father. Julius stood up. "How is your mother?" "She's fine," David said coldly. Julius swallowed. "When are you all coming back?" David laughed. "Back to what? To insults, to hunger, to watching you treat mommy like she doesn't matter." Julius had no response. David shook his head. "You never thought we would leave, did you?" Julius opened his mouth but couldn't find the right words. David sighed. "You only care now because you're alone. If you really loved us, you would have changed a long time ago." And with that, he walked away. Julius sat back, his heart pounding. He had lost his family, and this time he knew he had no one to blame but himself. Julius did not sleep that night. He sat in the darkness thinking. He thought about how he had turned into the man he once swore he would never be, how he had let pride ruin everything. Early the next morning, he went to Ifeoma's house. When Ada saw him at the gate, she was surprised. "What do you want?" Ada said. Julius looked at her eyes filled with regret. I came to say sorry." Ada folded her arms. "Sorry, after all these years." Julius sighed. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I thought I was the head of the house, but I was just a fool." Ada was silent. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he continued, "but I wanted to let you know I know I failed, and I am sorry." Ada stared at him for a long time. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "I don't hate you, Julius, but I will never come back." Julius nodded slowly. He had lost his family, and now he had to live with the consequences. As he walked away, Ada felt lighter. She had waited years for this apology, but now that she had it, she had realized she didn't need it. She had already moved on, and this time she wasn't looking back.